Mike, welcome.
Thank you for having me.
Sit anywhere.
You want me to wear this?
We're now live on TCTV Channel 8 and YouTube.
Okay, thank you, PCTV. This is John Henshaw, the chairman of the Community Preservation Committee. We are beginning our February meeting. This is a Zoom meeting, hopefully the last time, but who knows, right? So I am here with Brad Leighton. Also on the Zoom call, we have George Andrews, Mike Dixon, and Dennis Rich, also from the CPC. And as guests, we have Michael Capps and Joe Salata, I believe is JC from the Cemetery Commission. So we will roll right into the meeting. We'll probably have a couple other people join us, but we are presently at a quorum. So we have an agenda. We'll try to go through this quickly, but thoroughly. The first thing that we speak of is the minutes discussion. Now, Dennis sent a copy of the minutes from our January meeting, which was also our needs analysis meeting. I don't know if anybody's had a chance to review that, but also last month, because we had a delay getting started, the notes noted that it was an unofficial meeting, but it became an official meeting. So I think we revisited all the items. And so we're going to, stay with it being an official meeting last month because we did have a quorum. It just didn't happen right away. One of the outcomes of not having that quorum right away is we didn't review the minutes officially from the previous meeting. And so we need to discuss that. We did discuss it briefly, but we didn't have a vote on them. The one thing that we discussed was that missing from the minutes was the reference to the fact that we voted in December to request a town meeting article to expend $9,000 for the Baldwinville Elementary study project for the historic rehabilitation of the fire station for use by the Templeton emergency management team. So I wanted to make sure that got into the December minute. And I know we had.
I think I added it on a new, on my other copy on the computer.
Okay.
The other thing on that, just to bring your attention to it, the date for that meeting was actually the 21st, not the 12th.
Okay.
Yeah.
Of December. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Thank you. And Carrie Novak has now joined us as well from the committee. She's on the Zoom call too. So Carrie, we're just talking about the minutes. First, we're talking about the December minutes. I noted that we needed to, ensure, and Dennis has updated them to include that we did vote for that $9,000 request to annual town meeting for the Baldwinville fire station project. Did anybody else have any discussion, or are we willing to approve those December meetings with that change?
I make a motion, we approve the meetings with the change.
Second.
Okay, Brad has indicated a second. Is there any discussion on that? Okay, hearing none, we have to poll the members. I say yes. Brad?
Yes.
Yes. George?
Yes.
Mike?
Yes.
Dennis?
Yes.
And Carrie?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. So that approves the December minutes. Now, the January minutes that Dennis sent out, he reflected that it started as a unofficial meeting, but because we did get a quorum, once he was able to join us, that is an official meeting. So the minutes should reflect, because we revisited everything we had discussed, and anything that was official was discussed during the official meeting part. So I think the minutes just need to reflect that it was a full meeting. And I don't know if you guys have had a chance to review those minutes that he sent out, and if we could vote on those tonight or not.
I make a motion, we approve the meeting minutes.
Okay, so George is moving to approve the minutes, and Mike has seconded that. Any discussion? Hearing none, we'll canvass the voters again. I say yes. Brad,
Yes.
George,
Yes.
Mike,
Yes.
Dennis,
Yes,
and Carrie.
yes,
Okay, so we've now approved the December and January minutes. We also had that, the needs analysis meeting which is folded into that, but we don't need to discuss for that. The next thing that we need to talk about is the town meeting update. So at present, the only project we have going forward is that $9,000 request for the feasibility / design study for the Baldwinville Fire Station. We also need to have our annual appropriation article, which kind of indicates to the townspeople what our anticipated revenues would be. So I have heard from our deputy assessor, Luann, that the billing for the CPA for the current fiscal year is $227,726.31. That takes into account all of the abatements that have been requested to date. People have until April 1st to see, all the abatements, but it kind of gives us an indication of what our annual billing is projected for next year. And then we have to consider that the state match, which last year it was 100% match because they did increase the deed fees. And of course, real estate has been going crazy. So that 227,000 is a good estimate of what we will bill for next year's. And then our match could be equal to that. So if we wanted to, and really what this annual appropriation does is allows us to spend the money during the year if we were so inclined, regardless of the proceeding of the receipts. We get, they go to the allocation of the funds as we vote. So there'll be some deviation here or there, but all the monies that we receive go to the appropriate accounts. And so to make things simple, rather than doubling $227,726 to $455,500 or thereabouts, I thought, and this is what we've done in the past, is to say that we were estimating our receipts, which are the annual, receipts from the taxpayers, and then the match, which we have no control over and can vary and has varied over time, would be $450,000. So we'll have a discussion about this. And if it is $450,000, which would be essentially $227,000 in billing and $223,000 in match or whatever, if it goes over, we still get the money. It just gets allocated into those accounts and technically couldn't be spent in the same fiscal year as you appropriate it. However, we're still working on old money anyway, because we have built a reserve. So to that end, the $9,000 will come from money we already have received. So it doesn't need to be accommodated for in this motion, because we already have our significant reserves to cover for that. If the people wanted to vote it, it just makes it simpler in the appropriation. That being said, if we chose $450,000 as our estimated receipts, we would once again reserve the 10% or $45,000 for community housing, 10% or $45,000 for historic preservation, 10% or $45,000 for open space, 5% or $22,500 for admin. And Dennis, if we vote on these numbers, I will, you don't have to write them all down. I mean, if you have, great. And which leaves our general but unbudgeted reserve, which is 65% of the, appropriation of $292,500. So the warrant article would indicate to raise and appropriate through CPA receipts and the state match in November of 2022, $450,000 broken down into those categories. And so that's the article that, or we need to vote, or some deviation. Does anybody have any questions or comments on that?
John, any explanation as to why the increase this year in our assessment amount?
Well, we have had, You mean on the town? The last couple of years, it's been over $200,000.
Oh, has it? Okay.
Yeah.
All right, I thought it
So
was
last year we estimated $400,000. Now we're up to 450, and a lot of that has to do with the new growth that we're seeing as
Okay.
you drive around town. So, the town is limited, and if you have any questions, we can ask Brad, but, every year you can increase your base level levy by 2.5% at the most, thanks to Proposition 2.5, but any new growth is on top of that. So new growth, because of what was an empty parcel of land is now a $500,000 house. That's the new growth figure, and I imagine that's quite significant.
Okay.
And Brad is
What
chuckling.
what happens if it's less? What happened if the number comes in less than 450, like the state match is less?
It doesn't matter because we're also referencing the allocation as a percent. We're required by the statute to allocate the 10% to those primary funds. And so in the article, we say, estimated receipts $450,000, 10% or 45,000 to this. So what the
Okay.
treasurer does or the accountant does when she receives the money is she allocates it into the sub accounts accordingly, because it doesn't come all at once anyway. It trickles in every quarter. People are making payments, and then we get that big lump payment from the state in November. And so essentially it's the state match is based on what we bill, the match of the bill, as opposed to the the receipt. So if people don't pay their taxes, the state still pays us the match based on what we billed. So if people haven't paid their taxes right away, it all works out to the same thing. The monies are received and they go into those sub accounts based on the percentage of the total.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah. Okay, so what I've done is I presented that, and I know it's kind of a lot of verbiage, but it's this thing that we do annually, and that it would be drafted into the motion that we annually see for the town meeting, for the selectmen to put on the annual town meeting, if we have a motion to go forward.
And I make a motion that we go forward based upon the estimate of receipts and the percentage breakdowns.
Thank you.
I'll second that.
Okay, Carrie has made a motion and Dennis has seconded. Is there any discussion? Okay, hearing none, we'll canvass the voters again. Brad?
Yes.
Yes. George?
Yes.
Mike?
Yes.
Dennis?
Yes.
Carrie?
Yes,
And I vote yes, so that's unanimous. Thank you very much. The only other article, it's not an article, but the other financial thing. So that's a town meeting update. We didn't have any other projects put forward. That doesn't mean we won't. Right now we're running into the limits by the select board. They technically, I believe the bylaws indicate that they need to have everything to the advisory by March 15th or something like that. I don't know. So we're running up against the limit for the annual town meeting, even though it's in May, right now, but things could happen and we could talk with the administrator, et cetera, but that's where I see it as right now. So that the next item is the CPC finances. We did get our bill for the Community Preservation Coalition. That's based on our receipts, and it's $875. When that comes out of our administrative budget, if we're so inclined to pay it. And of course, they're very helpful in everything we do in terms of they maintain the database of projects that we can then survey and ask them for some guidance on certain things. So we would look for a motion to approve paying our annual Community Preservation Coalition membership fee.
Make a motion.
Okay, moved by Mike and seconded by Dennis. Thank you. Any discussion? Okay, hearing none, we'll canvass the voters. Brad?
Yes.
George?
Yes.
Mike?
Yes.
Dennis?
Yes.
Gary?
yes.
And I vote yes, so that's unanimous. Thank you very much. Okay, so now we're moving on to current projects, and this is where we're going to talk about the common burial ground signage. As you recall, we approved to expend funds to pay for the sign that the cemetery commissioners are looking at, provided we get a chance to chime in. And so we have on the line Joe Salata and Mike Capps from the Cemetery Commission. And I can try to pull up the picture. Joe, do you want to say anything?
Yes, absolutely. I'm trying to work my background here. I still got I'm on my company laptop, and they have kind of a funny background. Yeah, so definitely, John, I appreciate you having Mike and I join. So just to kind of bring to bear kind of where this is kind of coming from. So, you know, when we first got kind of brought on board, voted in as the cemetery board, you know, we did some assessments of the local properties, and you know, 2 historical cemeteries obviously come to mind that we have to maintain and have responsibility for, and that's, you know, the burial ground and then Baptist Common as well. And you know, I'm also trying to figure out some things as it relates to the Norcross Hill Cemetery too, but I understand that that's kind of state-owned land. But you know, as kind of what we did is we went out to the sites and we kind of surveyed, you know, some possibility of improvements, right, to kind of, you know, kind of bring that, I guess, to bring that historical component to the town. You know, Mike and I met up with John. We met at the Templeton burial ground, and you know, we took a look at the signage and just the overall kind of landscape of kind of the burial ground, and that's obviously a very nice location. It's you know, it's right next to the church, next to the town common. You know, and it's a pretty unique cemetery. I don't know if you guys ever had a chance to get down there and just take a walk around. You know, but there are a couple of concerning things, right? And first and foremost, you know, one of the things that we wanted to at least bring to CPC to potentially fund is a new sign. You know, the sign would be within, you know, kind of that historical feel. Yeah, John, like I said, I can email the group the designs. I actually went out and got designs from a company, and we actually put a couple of different designs together. We put a sign that actually had the town seal, and then one that didn't have the town seal. And John, one of the things that I wanted to mention is our last board meeting that we had, not yesterday, but in January, I shared that with the fellow commissioners and, you know, the local and Mary Beth and some folks at the DPW. And what they said to me is based upon the designs, we want to obviously, you know, I would obviously get the CPC's feedback as well. We were hoping to maybe lead with the sign that actually had you know, the town seal, because if you've had a chance to go out to the new cemeteries or the newer cemeteries, Green Lawn and Pine Grove, we actually in the fall put in brand new granite signs that clearly outline, you know, the dates. I mean, Green Lawn's kind of up in the air. We're still trying to determine, you know, the specific date of when ground was broke there. But with those signs, we've actually had the town seal included. So we're hoping to keep the methodology consistent with a sign that we potentially put forth in the burial ground.
Yeah, Joe, so if I could jump in, you did send that to us, and I do have it. If TCTV can allow me to share my screen, I can pull it up. But we did have the discussion, and the consensus was that everybody liked the one with the just like you said, the logo.
Seal, okay.
See if I can share my screen here. I'm not too good at all this, but I didn't see they've let me do it. One participant, so application. Okay, yeah, so here it is. And can you see that?
Yep,
Mhm.
yes. Mhm.
Yeah, that does show. So, so there it is with the town's logo, which is great. One comment was made, it would be nice to have like an established, you know, 1723 or whatever, if we knew that on there as well.
Right.
The one thing that the caveat to all this is because the town has supported two major projects down there. One was, of course, the tomb restoration, and the other was the Edwin Jackson Memorial, the Civil War Memorial. That we need to have a sign that indicated that work was done by the community as a result of the voters of Templeton and the Community Preservation Act. That's part of the stipulations of the Community Preservation Act. And maybe that could be on the back part of the sign, which may, of course, increase the cost, but we could maybe leave room so that we could add to it or whatever. I don't know if that's even possible, given the high density urethane or whatever that you'd be looking to do.
Sure. So let me provide some added
Okay.
information on that. So yeah, I actually did talk to the sign maker. I believe I put forth the quotes. He said he would include that language on the back, and the price did include it. So whatever that number was, I think it was like 3,000-ish or something like that. He did say that was included. It also include installation as well.
Okay. Yeah, so what we voted was because we have this administrative budget, is we voted a figure, and I believe it was not to exceed $3,000 for the the sign and its installation from our administrative budget, provided everybody was comfortable with it. And so that's why we're here tonight. So that will give everybody else a chance to weigh in. And you're probably not looking to do this till spring?
Yeah. So that's what they had mentioned to me. The sign maker's out of actually Swansea, New Hampshire. He actually does quite a bit. If you go up to Keene at all, you'll see his it's McCanny Signs. So it's right across the street from the Volvo dealership up there. So that's where we're potentially sourcing from. I did look into the same provider that provided the new signs for the cemeteries at Pine Grove and Green Lawn, but he's more on the granite side of the house. So he doesn't really deal with kind of what we were going for here. And this high density urethane is very durable. The sign manufacturer, it's about 8 weeks to create the sign. And then he did mention spring john, but he does not put like wooden structures outside just because they wear out. And he says this is probably good for 15, 20 years, if not more. So it's got some significant life to it. And based upon the design, it doesn't look like it'll fade much either. So, it seemed like a good, a reputable, kind of design, as well as a good company, and it's done some work. So yeah, that would be the springtime, June, I think you mentioned to me.
Okay, and of course, since you guys you're familiar with the procurement processes that the town needs to go through to buy this stuff, to make sure that there's a fair and open process. And as long as you're working with Adam on that, who's our, chief procurement officer, it is a requirement of the projects that we have done. We have that sign up there. It's really kind of ugly.
Yeah.
It was meant to be a temporary sign. So can anybody here share their thoughts on this whole thing, please?
I had a question.
Yeah.
The town logo, is that painted onto the sign, or is it embedded onto the sign? Is it a separate piece that they'll put into the sign, or how's that?
Yeah, no,
done?
it's a template, Mike. So it's actually carved in there. So I'm believing it's lasered in there. So they'll put the design in there, and they'll cut through, kind of what they did with it's a similar kind of format that the signs in the new cemeteries, where we provide them a file. They would then apply it to whatever software they've got, and they would be able to carve it right in there. It'd be permanent.
It's going to be multicolored, like
Yep.
is shown in the photograph, or is it black and white?
Yep, no, it's colored. Yep.
Multicolored. Oh, nice. No, I'm in favor of that.
Great. Does anybody have any objection to going forward, to giving our approval of that design and signage?
We didn't get any cost estimate even yet, or?
Yeah, they gave us a quote originally, and it was somewhere north of 2,000, and that's why we chose to approve the $3,000 expense to make
Okay.
sure that we had installation and all in the posts covered. Isn't that right, Joe?
That's correct. Yes, actually, Dennis, to answer your question, I actually had him put together two quotes, one without the logo and one with the logo. And the one with the logo is that $3,000 number. The one without the logo, I think, came in about 2,500. So we actually have the formal pricing, and it actually breaks it all down as well from the
And
maker.
I might even have that if I can go back. Let's see.
That was going to be my question, is if the 3,000 is going to cover it? Or did we need to revisit the approval amount?
That's a good question. Maybe we, let's see, I'm gonna try to share it again because it is indeed the, that is the, yeah, so it was $2,000. So that's a one-sided carved sign. For design one was without the logo and design two with the logo. So for adding, here's the detail: signs constructed from 2-inch high density urethane and using 23-karat gold leaf trim, 2 4x4 pressure treated posts with top caps, steel mounting brackets, and delivery. And so you're saying that it actually would include the installation, Joe?
Right, yep.
So
How about tax? Is there, because we're a town, is there no tax on that?
Right, we are tax exempt,
Okay.
Right.
especially if we drive up to
Hampshire,
New
too.
Hampshire. But-
Yeah, and you actually see as well, if you scroll down, John, there's more further detail on the layout. It says funded by Templeton Citizens Community Preservation Act on back of sign with vinyl lettering.
Oh, okay.
Oh, yeah, okay.
Yeah, I guess I missed that. So that's good. So I think it fits the bill, and hopefully they'll hold to this pricing. I mean, that is always the risk we have, but the beauty of this type of appropriation is it's not a town meeting vote, it's just a committee vote. So if for some reason there was a small deviation, we ourselves could vote to approve that rather than having a town meeting article. And you
John,
can-
John, we appropriated on the December 21st meeting, the $3,000, but that was with the idea that it was going to cost around $2,000. Do we need to up that amount just in case there's any overrun?
We could certainly entertain an additional a vote of say $500 to cover any overage just in case, but don't tell the,
Yeah, because otherwise we have to go back to town meeting.
No, we don't have to go back to town meeting, Dennis, because it's from our administrative budget.
Oh, okay. All right. All right.
I had one other question,
Okay.
Mr. Chairman. Are they going to take down and take away the old sign, or is the town going to be responsible for that?
Right, good question. Yeah, so actually the DPW guys are gonna do that.
Take that away. Okay.
And well, I have one other question also. While we're discussing the sign for the cemetery, has there been any more decisions made about the tree removal?
Right, so I was actually gonna bring that up, Dennis and John, tonight. That's actually, it is kind of, so I mean, I don't know if we want to continue with the article with the sign and then move on to the next one. I don't want to prevent, further discussion around that sign and move on to the next
I
component.
think the article was already approved in December, correct, Joe?
Yeah, so we could just, if everybody's happy with the design and the $3,000 and recognizing if there is any kind of small overage, we can come back and approve it, or we could approve a few $100s extra just as contingency right now. We can put the sign to bed.
Well,
Does the cemetery department see anything that would help them, pouring concrete for the footing or anything like that? I mean, is there other wishes you'd like to do with this sign, or are you good with it as it exists?
I know, Mike, I mean, I think I'm just good with it based upon the discussion with the contractor. I think, we've got some other ideas for that burial ground that, we're hoping to, to kind of obviously bring, but that's more maintenance, like, I've got a couple things, but yeah, I mean, as far as the sign goes, I mean, Mike, I don't think there was, I mean, ultimately what we'd like to do, and, maybe I could come to you with this as well, is we'd like to put that sign in there, but we'd also like to put some, plantings kind of in that front section, to kind of border the sign, as well as where the current kind of stone marker is in the front. I mean, And that's kind of a longer term project, but I mean, if we could maybe set aside, or at least look to set aside, it doesn't have to be done today, but if we could set aside money to put some plants in front of that, kind of give it some ambiance, make it inviting in there. That was the other thing that I had as it related to just the overall kind of design around the sign. And then of course the fencing, I'm actually working on trying to get that repainted with some community service help. But as far as the sign itself goes, I mean, okay, but just around it, plantings and things like that to make it kind of beautification. I was thinking about that as well. We're thinking about that.
Well, given that, Mr. Chairman, I would suggest we just leave that the way it is. We've already voted the money and it seems to be an adequate amount, and I think we're done with that.
Great, so let's go forward, but we will still vote just because we talked about, just to confirm that everybody's happy with the design as presented. Okay, so Brad?
Yes.
Brad's good. Carrie?
Yes,
Mike?
Yes.
Dennis?
Yes,
George?
Yes.
And I'm yes. So good. We've got that $3,000 appropriated, and you can go forward on your time frame. Now, you wanted to speak about the larger scale project.
Yeah. Appreciate the time. So, as part of the overall kind of goals here, so the sign was number one kind of on the list. Number two, when we kind of went into the cemetery, it's a beautiful spot. I mean, it's really unique. It's got historical value. There are some trees that are in there that are, to put it mildly, it seems like you spent money in restoring, the Edwin Jackson Memorial, and you've spent some money doing the tomb restoration. I don't want to run the risk of any kind of a hazard happening where it damages, the stones, these historical stones, or, potentially damages, some of the restoration work you've done. So, it's kind of it's not as simple as it looks. I mean, we actually had gone out and requested a tree company to come out, with consulting, Bob and his team. And they actually made the suggestion too, because I don't know if you knew, but a couple of years ago, might have been even less than a year ago, one of the trees from an adjoining property, I mean, literally barely missed, one of the stones, right? And we don't want any damage to be done. So we went out and we got a company to give us a quote to do some hazardous tree removal. It's a pretty hefty price. It was a $30,000 price tag for a couple of reasons. You need to have, there's a lot of big dead trees in there with a lot of tree rot. If you take a walk back there, I mean, these things are probably a couple hundred years old or more, and they've got some rot in there, and they could potentially, a hard storm or ice could potentially take one of those trees down. All of a sudden, you're in a situation where you could have damage the stones and overall the cemetery. But the tree company would actually need climbers. They would actually need to bring in a mini lift in there. And it's a very manual process. Initially, it was thought that you could potentially get like a bucket truck back in there. But I mean, even I said, there's no way you can get a bucket truck back there. When that was first brought to my attention, you're going to need climbers to get up there and kind of bring it down, piece by piece, to do it efficiently, safely, and to not damage any of the areas. So we went out and we got a quote. We received a quote back from a company called Georgia the Jungle Tree Service for $30,000 as an estimate. I also understand, the procurement process. I've reached out to a couple of tree companies as well, and I actually haven't heard back because I just think of the complications that are associated with the project. And John, I actually sent you that quote as well. And really, if we could somehow get the CPC to raise, and I don't know how we do this, whether it's through a town warrant or however, but like I said, I don't want to run the risk of any damaged, trees coming down and then impacting, that cemetery and damaging, any of the stones, right? As it is, every year, there's more and more of the stones that kind of get more and more kind of, eroded and cracked and all this other stuff. And if we could take that risk out of the equation, that's kind of the goal. And we would do a proper assessment. We kind of went through it with the company, and they kind of broke down, where we'd probably want to put, where we'd want to do the work. Bob was out there as well as the tree ward to kind of go through there. So, you know, that was kind of another project that we wanted to at least put forth to the CPC for consideration. You know, again, just to avoid the risk of having any of those kind of old damaged trees or any of those limbs, because there's a lot of dead branches, a lot of dead branches up there coming down, and, you know,
Yeah,
impacting the stones. And then, you know, who knows if someone's even back there, you know what I mean? It could be, you know, freak things have happened, right? So, you know, just to kind of, if we could, that would be something that I wanted to put forth to the committee and get their feedback.
yeah. So, you know, we always have to be cognizant of what the limitations are on funding that we can do. So routine maintenance is not one thing, but this is not routine maintenance. This is protection of a resource that's not by any stretch of the imagination, you know, routine, based on, like you've indicated, the fact that you're on a slope and you're over 200-year-old, you know, headstones, and even the quote that we got, I'm sure the town will require, you know, bonding and insurance as well, because that is, you know, these are irreplaceable items. And, you know, so you just want to be covered in the case that something did happen in the process of the removal. So who knows? That would have to go through a bidding process. But I believe, because we did talk about this and we did some review, that it would be qualified as a protection and a rehabilitation, a historic preservation, if you will, of the cemetery and the stones there. And I know Joe and Mike, we had also spoken about the organization that does the cleaning of the stones and perhaps folding that in as well. So it's a $30,000 quote that we have from one vendor, and that you know, typically when we put projects forward, we try to get as much information in advance to come up with a figure of what is appropriate, and always try to leave some contingency in there for overages. And so in addition to the quoted price, you know, we might need to, you know, they might need to do bonding, which may, you know, cost them some more money that they would fold into their price on a bid, because it would be a more of a formal bid process because of the value. Once you exceed 25,000, or maybe it's up to 30,000 now, you have to, you know, get written quotes and do a solicitation request for proposals, as opposed to standard business practices for lower cost items. And then if we wanted to do this project that also included the cleaning solution, and I know you had said that there could be a volunteer effort coordinated, you know, if a project wanted to go forward in that whole space, you know, we just have to come up with a figure. And we're also under the you know, the time constraints of getting our articles together and approved by this committee, so that then the select board actually would vote to put it on the warrant, which they've always done. And they've recognized that it's our job as the gatekeeper to put things forward. Nothing gets expended without going through the CPC. We know we have the resources in our, you know, we're just allocating another $45,000 for historic preservation for the coming year, and we have a balance. So that's the context, and I want to get everybody else's thoughts on this.
John, I had a question. My recollection is after the big ice storm that there were a number of limbs that came down after that. Was the CPC involved with that cleanup effort, or was that strictly the town?
Yeah, no, that was right about when we got started. We didn't even know anything then, but
I know Alan Mayo was driving that, and there was a lot of headstone damage as a result. And I know a lot of the headstones got worked on, but as far as the historical commission is concerned, I would be all in favor of that type of work taking place. You know, that's an icon of our town back there, and we really need to preserve it the best we can. So I think it's a project well worth considering.
great. And so one other consideration that we need to undergo is that anytime we have a capital expenditure, even though this is not a procurement, we do have to go forward to capital planning committee prior to, you know, just to let them know that it's on the radar. And that's another step in the process. And we might have to request a special meeting if we wanted to put forward an article for the May town meeting. Alternatively, we could seek to do something for a fall town meeting, but of course now you've lost half a year or whatever. So, I mean, we could go forward with a basic article that we could vote on of some figure to go forward to get it onto the town meeting warrant, provided we meet all the other, challenges of the capital planning, et cetera, if we wanted to, or we could take the slow approach and wait for another special town meeting like would happen in the fall or something like that. I mean, I agree with Mike that it is a valuable, that is a great resource back there for the town. It's,
Well, what is the deadline for putting anything in for the town meeting, for annual town meeting?
well, I would have to check with Adam, but we may be able to vote something at our March meeting, or we may have to have a meeting in advance of that, but it's within the next month.
I would just be hard pressed without at least a second quote to, go ahead with that kind of money. Now, I have personally used George of the Jungle in the past at my house, and they did a bang up job. But when it comes to that type of money, I'd really like to see at least 2 quotes, if not 3. It looks better when you go to town meeting and you've done your due diligence. You kind of get picked apart if you don't. So
Could we put a warrant article holder for the warrant for this particular issue, John?
Well, we could certainly vote to indicate to the select board that we're investigating and hoping to pull together a full article. And yes, they've done placeholder articles in the past. And then they might say, no, it's got to be voted by February 10th, and then we're out of business. But they could say, yes, I need it by February 28th, and we could do a special meeting, or we could do it in our March meeting to get the details.
And the next question would be whether Joe can get a second quote on that.
Right, yeah, and I mean, I'd have to go, I mean, I've got a couple of other companies, that I could look into as well. I'd called a couple, I'd called one in Hubbardston. But it's a pretty complex project, right? I mean, it's not as straightforward as bringing a bucket in and sending someone up there and just kind of limit it down. I mean, you've got to have, and that's the reason why, Dennis, I think that I haven't really had too much success, because just in that line of work, I mean, to find climbers like that, to do that kind of work is hard enough. So yeah, I mean, there's certainly a lot of companies, and I'm trying to kind of keep it, locally sourced. I mean, there's some big tree companies, like Asplund and like Davy and some of these others that have been around for a long time. I just don't know, kind of where they'd stand, but they do a lot of the utility line clearance, but yeah, it's just the complexity of the project. I think that's why it's a little harder to find people.
But I would keep in mind too that a no quote is a quote. So if you've contacted multiple companies and you've only had one company who gives you a quote, that means that the other companies either aren't qualified or aren't interested. So I mean, you've done your due diligence by going out and trying to get quotes. As long as you keep record of the people that you contacted and the fact that they had no interest in the job. That's part of trying to get the quotes. Anyway, it counts. It's work done, even if it comes back as a no quote.
Okay.
Yeah, that's a good quote. Good point, Mike. And remember, what we're doing by getting this pricing up front is we're not committing to any vendor until we get the monies approved, and then they have to go through the process of requesting formal quotes with the money in place. So even though we have a quote from George, that doesn't mean we would go with George without doing the second step once the monies are approved. So it kind of gives us an idea of the ballpark. And that's why we also like to have a little contingency built in, because it could be a year before the price, the quote is actual, binding. And therefore they may say, yeah, I was going to do 30,000 in January of 2022 or whatever, but now it's, prices have gone up or whatever. So then we run the risk of not having enough money appropriated, and then we have to go back to town meeting. That's what we want to avoid that. So how do we want to proceed?
Well, I don't know.
Well, I think we've got to do something. And I'm not really real familiar with the exact process, what we need to do when, but I think we need to, what should be our first step done? Talking to capital planning, or?
That just has to happen. We can do it, whatever we need to do to expedite the process, because we know the process is going to be thorough and meet and comply with all laws. So, we can, because not only if we vote a project, let's say we voted $50,000 to go forward, then it goes to the select board, and then we have to notify capital planning to see if we can get a meeting prior to the placement on the warrant. But once we've determined what that number is, that's it. Basically it doesn't get changed on the floor. It doesn't get changed by the select board. So if we want to spend some time to try to pull it together and figure out what, get a better handle on that number, then we should wait. If we're confident that we can have it, and typically if we have a not to exceed, basically what we do when we appropriate the money is that's the max we could spend. And obviously if we don't spend it, it just reverts, it doesn't get used, and it's available for other projects. So
I like Dennis's idea of a placeholder.
Okay.
If that's something that the selectmen would consider, I mean, that would give us a little bit of breathing room. We know it's already, there's a spot for it on the warrant, and I kind of like Dennis's idea.
yeah, because then we can make sure that we're not some unforeseen things. So basically what we would be saying is making a vote. So it's a formal vote that we are interested in supporting this project. It's not fully defined, but we want to define it to the point where it's ready for the selectmen to put on the warrant. We'll still need to vote the number again before it goes to them. So, but we could do that with we get a 48-hour notice, and do a quick meeting, for example. Do you guys want to go forward like that?
Yeah,
Yeah, that sounds reasonable.
Support that.
Okay, so Dennis, you're making a motion that we request, we notify the select board that we are evaluating this proposal by the Cemetery Commission for the Common Burial Ground tomb protection, historic preservation, but we don't have the details. We want to pull that together and want to make sure that we meet their deadlines, including capital planning.
as you just stated, John.
Yeah.
Okay, so I'll write that down and share that with everybody if that's what we decide to do. Does anybody have any additions?
I will second the motion.
Okay, so its motion is made and seconded. Any discussion? And we can indicate to them that we have some preliminary pricing, so we know roughly what we're talking about. And then Joe and Mike, maybe we can email back and forth and kind of narrow it down, and anybody else that wants to, be in the process. And then we'll have another meeting depending on when the selectmen say we've got to have it signed, sealed, and delivered. Okay, so we have a motion
Thank you.
made and seconded. Any other discussion? Okay, hearing none, we'll do the vote. Brad?
Yes.
Yes. Mike?
Yes.
Dennis?
Yes,
Carrie?
Yes.
George?
Yes,
And I vote yes too. So we will do the placeholder. Cemetery, the common burial ground to cemetery, preservation. We got to use those verbs that are in the Community Preservation Act, and preservation is one of them. So Very good. So that's what we'll do, and we'll see what kind of time frame. If they say absolutely can't do it by now, then that's one thing, but likely they'll be able to work with us as long as we keep them in the loop and they tell us what we need to do. That sound good?
Sounds
Great.
good.
Yeah,
Okay.
thank you.
Thank you.
Great. Do you guys have anything else you wanted to bring up?
No, the only other thing is that, definitely let's work on this project. I mean, down the road, John, and fellow committee members, I was hoping to do a sign as well at Baptist Common. George and I actually had a discussion, a couple of days ago. So not necessarily right away, but something down the road that we're thinking about doing as well.
Yeah, so since we haven't used any CPA funds for Baptist Common, we might want to do a project that requires a sign as part of it. That's why we can certainly use our administrative budget because we've done projects at the Common Burial Ground. So maybe there's something else we could do for the Baptist Common thing, even if it is, putting there's probably something that could be done or maybe not, but.
Yeah, I think, what I was thinking there is, it's kind of a unique spot back there. Was thinking about kind of putting a sign back in there, maybe put some plantings around it kind of as you walk into, that cemetery. That was really, it's pretty, there's really not much. I mean, as I walked back there a couple times, but that was just kind of what I was thinking, a sign, maybe some plantings, some beautification. And then, as part of the other project we discussed earlier about getting the solution to clean the stones, and I'll bring that up with the commission. I actually had talked to some folks about restoration solutions that actually clean stones, and actually use the solution at the Arlington National Cemetery. And so I'd actually submitted that to John. You can get a 55-gallon drum for about $1,900. And there was a couple of volunteers, at least in the historical commission that I heard, that would be interested in doing that kind of restoration work on those stones. So, maybe, John, we could kind of layer that into the project, where it's stone restoration, the sign, and maybe some beautification around that entranceway, as kind of the broader project.
Yeah, that's great. I think that's something we could even fold into this, placeholder preservation for the Common Burial Ground. We're also going to do it there. Now we can put a sign down there too.
Yeah, there's just a couple of things I need to kind of talk to Luann about, just, I'm going to probably draft a letter because there's some right of way stuff in there that we just got to be cognizant of. But
yeah, and if in the preservation you need to do some easement work or other types of things, that could also be, we're getting off the scope, but that's something that also could be part of the preservation if there's, and even if there needs to be, some, some legal work or things like that, that isn't already been allocated funds for by a cemetery, then that could be part of a project. It has to be a project, but you can put all kinds of facets in there. So that's probably something separate, but I like the idea of working on the Baptist Common Cemetery too. I know everybody supports those types of things. Okay, great. Well, we've got some work to do with you guys, and we'll look forward to keeping the dialogue going, and we'll keep you in the
sounds
loop.
great.
Does that sound reasonable?
That sounds
Okay,
great.
we're going to move on then.
Thank you
Okay,
for your
yeah,
time.
Thank you for your time.
Yep. Thanks for joining us.
Hi,
All
guys.
right, thanks.
Yeah. And of course, you're welcome to stay with us if you like. The one other item that I wanted to share with everybody relates to the discussion that we've had about the First Church of Templeton. So as you might recall, some church members came forward because they're looking to do some preservation work at the First Church. They requested and received a letter from the Historical Commission to emphasize the important role that the church plays in the Templeton Common. However, because of the fact that it is a church and an active church, the caveat is because there's been legal cases and there is both this, there's this separation of church and state in our Constitution, state and federal, there's also regulations that prohibit the expenditure of state funds in support of religious activities. So you have to, the Supreme Judicial Court reviewed a case from the town of Acton in 2018, and that kind of sets the benchmark of what needs to happen in a project for it to be above reproach and not likely to be challenged in court and law in the town losing regarding this whole separation of church and state thing. And one of the key tenets of that is that the funds are not supporting the meeting of the congregation, if you will. I mean, everybody agrees that the First Church of Templeton is an iconic structure. It's got, its role in the town, logo and things like that, and great things happen there. There's secular activities all the time. But the lawyer is very reluctant. I shared his findings with Mike because as the Historical Commission, I can share that with everybody. Essentially, if you are providing funds that allows the church to meet that they wouldn't otherwise be able to do, then it doesn't meet the standard. So basically where he's coming from was a big part of the request was replacing the roof. The roof is leaking. They wanted to preserve it and restore it back to the original slate roof, which is certainly a preservation. But by repairing the roof, now you're allowing the congregation to meet in its church. The town council was not comfortable with that meeting the standard. The other piece of what they're looking to do is to repair the pediment, which is the front face of the church. It's got that ornate structure and things like that. And so that's an exterior thing, and it's, an iconic visage. And he said, the attorney Harrington also indicated that, if we can show that there's some historic significance to that, like even if there were old photos of some historic activity happening there, or whatever, that would be helpful. But that was an easier, to accommodate the separation of church and state thing. So I've shared this with the church as well. And I said, we'll follow up and talk about it some more. But as it stands right now, getting the roof redone may not, and if the town council shows reluctance, the select board are nobody wants to put the town at risk. Essentially what would happen is if we awarded that and somebody challenged it in court, well, the church would have to pay the money back, which of course they don't have. And so that's kind of the sticky wicket. And if the town owned that church and leased it back to the congregation, that's a different kettle of fish. But because it is the church's building and is the church is an active congregation, there's a lot of legal ramifications that are codified and also, in case history. So it wasn't what I was hoping to hear, frankly, because I agree with everybody and certainly Mike and the Historical Commission about how important that thing is. So what do? Wait till it falls apart and they have to disband the church and now you can rebuild it for, it's not practical, but it's, that's the challenge that we're confronted with.
Did you get a chance to talk to our CPC?
Yes. So the Community
Yeah.
Preservation Coalition, whenever
Coalition.
the coalition's first thing is, if you're doing any projects related to a church, is to talk to town council. So that's why
okay.
I talked to Adam and we voted to, approve that. We will pay for that consultation out of our administrative budget. We talked about that at our last meeting, because it's part of our process. And so I asked for a meeting with the attorney too, just to kind of not just get like a written thing. And he kind of talked this whole thing through, which is basically the same thing that they say in the court case from Acton. Acton had a stained glass windows that they wanted to have redone. They said absolutely not, because they're religious icons in the figures. They wanted some other things to do, but they withdrew the whole project. So the SJC never acted on that, but they did put forward this, basic guidance as to how to approach this going forward. And that's the standard that we're paying our lawyer to tell us the same thing that we can read on the
Hmm.
internet.
Seems to me though that, the Historical Society probably could provide plenty of pictures, that would help at least the exterior project.
Yeah, I think we can get the exterior one. And one of the things that they spoke about doing was maybe reverting the pediment back to the original, more plain structure. But I would say, let's go with the full blown, because they were trying to save money on that. But if this is an approvable thing, I mean, I like that little beadwork and all that kind of stuff that's on the front face of the church. So yes, I agree, Carrie, that we probably could get that, to pass muster. The unfortunate part is, the roof is like $200,000 that they're looking for. And I don't think we're going to be able to do it, but we could certainly, the pediment is also a structural challenge as well. It's pulling away from the building. So that needs to be repaired. Those are the two. They've got other issues too. Those are the two that they brought forward because they're the most pressing. And we're not going to be able to do anything on the roof. So we could certainly talk about the pediment. And we even we approved at the last meeting to go forward with these projects, provided we got the legal review. So I think we're kind of in a similar mode as we need to get more information. Mike, do you think we could, maybe Harry Aldrich, or maybe the Historical Society, or if it's not the commission, might be able to find a few photos from.
I'll give Brian Tangway a call. We'll be able to get something.
Yeah, that would be great. And we could.
I know that there's pictures of Civil War soldiers in front of the church with the pediment in the background. There's numerous photographs around.
Okay, so, and I told the folks from the church that I would follow up with them for more discussion, and maybe we can at least focus on that to support that, and they'll have to do fundraising for the roof. Unless somebody wants to buy the church from them. I don't think they're gonna sell.
Make a nice brewery. They seem to be all the rage right now.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, so that was the only other item I wanted to share. Is there anything anybody wants to bring up otherwise? New business, old business, etc.? Okay, well, hearing none, seeing none, we can look at our next meeting is, so as I forwarded that memo from Lori that basically said that it appears that this prohibition of in-person meetings is going to end on February 28th, so that we couldn't have Zoom meetings anymore anyway. I think, I'm not totally sure, but it looks like our March meeting will most likely be in person for those that are comfortable to go.
Is that back to the library again?
No, we still have to do it at the town hall because they have indicated that they want it to be televised, and the library's not set up for that.
Oh, yeah.
So let's see, that would be March. Oh yeah, that's right. March and February are the same. March 10th. Will be the next meeting at 6:30 at town hall. We probably will have a Zoom access too, but we can stay tuned on that. I will post it as an in-person meeting. If we'll see what happens.
Okay,
Same time, 6:30.
Yeah.
Thank you.
okay, I'll make a motion that we adjourn if there's nothing else.
I second.
Okay, it's been seconded. All those in favor can wave goodbye or say. All right. Thank you, everybody.